Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohail Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Good morning, Lloyd.
Good morning, Sohail.
Great to see you. I see you are back in the office. That looks good. A nice painting in the background.
Nice to be in a real workplace, although I enjoy work from home.
Yes, because I think you are one of the first person I have seen with a standing desk. So you have been an innovator in many ways, right?
That and
Big and small.
I also miss during COVID. I normally bicycle in every day, but I lost a lot of exercise time by working from home.
Okay. So maybe before we start, you can introduce yourself, who you are, what are things that you're passionate about.
Well, thanks. I'm a senior urban development specialist, but I focus here at ADB on urban transport.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, though, I like being sort of in the umbrella of urban development, because I think what we're trying to do more and more with our projects is, we don't just have an energy specialist and a transport specialist, and we do our own silos. I think, we would like to see projects that really cut across mobility, climate resilience, conventional air pollution improvements, social sustainability, particularly on the gender and community development side. I also work a lot on universal accessibility for persons with disabilities. Mm-hmm. Energy and technology is also a corner of all this, and I think we'll spend some time talking about that. But more and more, with this whole holistic approach to projects, and Sahil, I know you try to do the same. We're getting into areas with even in our mobility projects where we have aspects of a circular economy that might involve urban agriculture or historical restoration, as we are in our project right now in Karachi. So, yeah, I think traditionally I've been an urban transport person focusing on public transport and non-motorized, but more and more I think our work is evolving in a way to be much more about a holistic approach to urban development.
So you are non-motorized transport is mostly bicycle and others, right? So it's a
non-motorized.
What does it cover?
Yeah, I mean, the most basic transport in the world is one we often forget about, but is pedestrians, walking. And if you think about it, even if you're getting into your Tesla and, driving somewhere, at some point in your trip, either walking to your Tesla or getting to your office, it involves walking. So virtually every trip in the world does that. And for much of the world's population, walking is fundamental. I think, also certainly it's true, bicycles are part of that. And, within the whole idea of last kilometer, last mile connectivity these days, beyond the bicycles, there's other things like scooters and, other sort of what we call micro mobility, which is a whole new sort of sector. Now, some of those are typically either electrified or they're pedal or push oriented, but they're all pretty clean. And the more we can make micro mobility a real thing in our transport circles, it, for instance, improves the viability of public transport, because it's often that last kilometer that forces people into a car or motorcycle.
Yeah. I mean, every time you said that, I've seen flashes in my eye. There was a gentleman or a university teacher in RMIT in Melbourne who used to rollerblade to work.
Okay, yep.
So along Swanston Street, I mean, I think then Swanston Street still had traffic. He'll just zip past. But now, of course, there's no more cars on those streets. So
Rollerblading qualifies as micromobility. So that's a good example.
good. That's one of the hobbies I'm trying to pick up again.
Very good.
You mentioned about a project in Pakistan, you're passing.
Yeah, I think, Pakistan's quite interesting to us. It is a country that has a lot of major projects with ADB. It's one of our largest donor countries. But more importantly, in 2020, and so much has been going on in 2020, everything that maybe, some of this news gets lost. But in 2020, Pakistan passed one of the most progressive electric vehicle policies in the world. So this is their EV. It covers 2020, 2025, but it sets very ambitious targets for penetration rates of electric vehicles. So they're aiming by 2030 that 30% of the fleet of passenger vehicles and heavy duty vehicles are electric. And then by 2040, 90%. Now, that may be overly ambitious. And you could say for Pakistan, who have, a lot of basic mobility issues, this is really leapfrogging. I mean, this is going from a very low state to, but we've seen this type of technological leapfrogging in developing countries before. The smartphone is a great example where penetration rates in low-income countries actually beat wealthier nations. So I'm glad they have put out these ambitious targets. And behind it is, they have put some incentives in. So they've zeroed out customs and import duties for electric vehicles, whereas it's, substantial for fossil fuel internal combustion engine vehicles. They've also made sort of vehicle registration free for electric vehicle. The renewal of that is free. And then for parts, any parts aimed at EV related, it's just a 1% sales tax. So those are nice incentives. It's still a long ways to, there is still a price gap there. And that's where I think, we're trying to come in with ADB with a couple projects. So we're 1 year into operation of our Peshawar bus rapid transit system, and we can talk a little bit about that. We're also right now underway with electric three-wheeler project in both a city called Sialkot in Pakistan and in Karachi. So if you like, we can talk a bit about what we're doing in those projects.
Absolutely. Just I have one quick question. You mentioned that the spare parts for electric vehicle will have only a tiny 1% tax. Will electric sort of lithium battery qualify for that as well?
Definitely. So, the batteries, the motors that go with that, the electric motors. So yeah, anything that's discernibly part of the EV powertrain qualifies for that special duty rate.
Wow. I mean, that will create on its own a big revolution on off-grid electrification, because with the lithium battery. Oh, that's fantastic.
Definitely. I mean, I think, some people have criticized this, though, that maybe it's locking them into imports. There's not as much incentive to set up local manufacturing. And I know the government is looking now at how to also, at the same time, incentivize local manufacturing. So, that's also something they're looking at.
Yeah, I had at least 3 different guests on this podcast platform, Battery Gurus in Global. battery gurus. And their argument was quite valid one for a developing country or any country, unless you have access to a huge market, to start with maybe a battery pack rather than going all the way and go into battery cells, because battery cells is dominated right now by only for a handful number of countries. So going there, not being able to maintain quality, maybe the immediate step will be doing battery pack and create the market, and then bringing in. Oh, fantastic. This is
Definitely.
very exciting. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, you may want to go and expand some on your project. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I'll talk a little about projects. I'll say one other incentive on their policy, which is notable. And, I think in some ways we'd like to take this Pakistan policy and see if we could get other countries to pick it up as well. One other thing you'll be interested to know, they've committed in urban areas to having one fast charger sort of area every 10 kilometers, so that there is this question, as you know, worldwide on, the chicken or the egg, what comes first, the EV or the charging infrastructure? And I think many people are saying that they do need to happen in tandem. So I just wanted to mention that. So yeah, I think with respect to our projects, certainly money from international financing institutions, it's concessional money, meaning it's very precious. And our cities are still very sensitive to the price differential between electric vehicles and sort of more conventional ICE vehicles. But what we're seeing is, looking at the market, at least down on the consumer side, that's really dropping. I mean, we were just looking at the other day at an option for sort of vans, and you can now get an all-electric van from People's Republic of China, PRC, for 100,000 yuan, which is $15,000. You may be familiar with companies like BYD and others who, on the consumer side, the small vehicles, sedans and such, are starting to really become cost competitive. I think on the heavier vehicles, as you can imagine, the demands of, even with lightweight lithium-ion technology, the costs are still substantial. It could be, a multiple of, say, 2.5. And therefore, in our BRT project, in Bus Rapid Transit project in Peshawar, which is this corridor of 27 kilometers of dedicated busway, another 80 kilometers of direct services coming into that. It's been in operation for a year. It's got 200,000 passengers per day. It's been very successful. And our philosophy on the technology was to try to provide a transition way to EVs. And what I meant with that, the technology chosen was plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which is, if you're familiar with hybrids, there's sort of two flavors there. One is a conventional one, which is only getting energy from regenerative braking. And that would be, if you're familiar with the Toyota Prius and other sort of vehicles. But that doesn't really, in terms of future infrastructure, in terms of charging infrastructure or anything, it doesn't get you, where you want to go necessarily with full electrification. It also, the hybrid component in a BRT system may only provide about 10% of the energy input. Whereas if we go with both regenerative braking and plug-in batteries in a hybrid configuration, we're keeping our vehicle costs relatively competitive. But because of the plug-in component, we're adding both fast charging and slow overnight charging. And you can see that, in the next decade, as electric buses become more competitive, Peshawar will be in a good place, because in 10 years, those buses will be replaced anyway. that they'll may be able to make this transition more smoothly. So that was sort of one strategy where, looking at the cost differential, it was difficult because of our budgetary constraints, but we found a technology solution that at least set us on the path towards full electrification in the future. I hope that makes sense.
No, yeah. I mean, that's actually a clever solution in a way. How large are these batteries for the when you do plug-in hybrid?
So we, the usage can maybe, well, it kicks in through the controller unit, mostly sort of from a station and starting. So startup is where the electric is most efficient. So maybe from stopping at a station to, getting up to speed, and then you may find that at a certain speed, the hybrid, the diesel engine component is going to take over. What we're finding is that, operating in that mode, if it was in an all electricity mode, we would maybe be operating for 15 minutes. But, as it stands, we can get a couple of passes along the corridor. We also have fast charging units at sort of the ends of the corridor. So, once we get to the end of the corridor, just by natural sort of dispatch behavior of vehicles anyway, you may have a 5 to 10 minute period where we can fast charge. So usually by the end of the day, we are fully expended. At the end of the shift, the batteries we will be fully expended, and then we go back to slow charging. But during the day, we can manage things where we're particularly getting that crucial moment in sort of the startup phase from a station for maybe the first 20, 30 meters.
Okay. So yeah, I was just thinking, even if it had, say, a bus will have a few 100 kilowatt hour batteries. So if it was only even 10 or 15 kilowatt hour, when you go to replace them, you can, by the time technology has moved on in the same space, you may be able to chuck in double the size of kilowatt hours. So that range could be substantially extended as well. That's very good, very clever.
That is possible. I mean, we have built into the package that at around year 6 of vehicle life, we would expect a replacement. I think the general philosophy is a little different with mobile battery sources versus stationary, that usually by the time, particularly if we were definitely getting down to sort of return to 70% of state of charge, if that's sort of where the battery life is, then usually for mobile sources, because you are paying a big price, because of the weight, that makes sense to swap it out. I should say, though, that usually what happens with EVs is you're taking those EV battery packs and then, maybe selling them or using them in stationary sources. And we do have long-term plans in Peshawar where we like to cover the depots with solar panels. And, maybe the future battery packs that are going to be recycled out would be an option used in conjunction with our solar system at the depots.
Oh, fantastic. So you already have the second life use of those batteries planned.
That's what we hope.
Okay, very good, very good. So yeah, I think there is a huge opportunity for replicability of the same approaches, because the batteries, even at the cell level, is less than $100 a kilowatt hour. So when we did the e-trike, it was $1,200. So the world is a very different place now, 10 years later. So fantastic. You're also doing some three-wheelers, no? You mentioned.
And that's the other effort we're going on. So we're going to continue to push on the large vehicle, the bus side, but where today, I think EVs are quite competitive, and it's an area I know close to your own heart, is with three-wheelers. And we are first moving in a city called Sialkot. It's sort of a little bit north of Lahore. It's a city of about 1 million inhabitants. And we're going to do a demonstration project underway right now with 200 electric three-wheelers. These are going to feature swappable battery systems. So there'll be sort of battery hubs at different staging points in the city. And at those battery hubs, they'll be solar powered. You know, we're not naive. We realize that the battery hubs will probably also need to be connected to the grid. But, you know, we do think starting with a swappable battery hub married with electric three-wheelers and solar energy, you know, it allows us to really set an example in Pakistan. And each one of those components, you know, that's the purpose of demonstration projects. We want to see how each of those perform. Maybe the other notable aspect of this project, we're also, an aspect of it will be, there will be a component that is a sort of what we call a pink taxi service model, where there will be women-only drivers who provide services to women only, particularly in the subcontinent, that sort of harassment and violence against women. There's been unfortunately, some infamous incidents on public transport systems. And as you know, this really discourages women from participating in the economy in general. So if at the same time we're trying to, you know, test these concepts with electric three-wheelers and swappable solar-powered battery hubs, we also want to see if we can be, you know, introducing a viable women-only or women-friendly service at the same time.
I mean, that would be very interesting globally as autonomous vehicle come in, right? So that you have any views on that one? You have any views on that one? How it might impact, especially in developing Asia with the autonomous? Of course, there's an issue of employment and all of that as well.
Yeah, well, I think you know, particularly in the three-wheeler market, where you know, employment is very important, and we want to make sure that continues. It's particularly an important employment source for low-income persons. So the survival of that, and you know, every day, as if you go to Lahore or Karachi, you can see that particularly motorcycles are taking over. You can also see it in the streets here in Manila. And that a lot of employment is being lost in, say, the three-wheeler market because of that. So, you know, providing an opportunity, which we see as additional, because there's a lot of trips women aren't taking currently, for example, and, you know, employment for women, saving employment for these relatively low income three-wheeler drivers, rickshaw drivers, has ramifications not just in Pakistan, but you know, as you say, across our region. And it's interesting when you do one of these projects. We also did sort of I don't know if you recall, we did in Lumbini, Nepal, a sort of pedelec. So a pedal and electric, one of these three-wheelers. And what I found interesting from that is, as word got out, we got requests from all over the world. As far as Latin America, you know, we're very interested in that vehicle. Can you share the drawings? I mean, and of course, everything we did was open source. So we did that. And yeah, that is my hope, that if we can do a very high profile project in Pakistan, it may have beneficial demonstration, you know, impacts across the region.
Yeah, and also for countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, and some part of India, which has low electrification, including Bangladesh and maybe in the Pacific as well. You mentioned last mile, and if your three-wheeler has an extra 10 kilowatt hour battery that they can charge in the last minute or pick it up when your battery swap, then they can go back to the last mile and connect the whole neighborhood's public lighting into that tricycle. No, I mean, because it's still electric cars are battery on wheels. So in many cases, you may not need to run those dingy lines and all the way. An issue of pilferage, issue of collecting, billing, and all of those goes away because you bring a trike at the end. So that would be fun as well, no?
Those are, some of the interesting opportunities here, and yeah, I hope I like that idea. We had some much smaller ideas, like as a business allowing charging of mobile phones or other things. But it is interesting if you think of a distributed energy network. What is the potential use of the battery sets, I guess, both the battery sets, both on the vehicles themselves, and then what about in our battery hubs? What, is that a revenue source that we can do something, could we run, as you were suggesting, maybe local street lighting from our battery hubs in a, looking at, different times of the day where energy costs are low, and then, so, I don't know, those are all interesting things. And I do think we need to be creative in the business opportunities to make it all work.
Yeah, I mean, you can rent out battery EVs for parties and things like that, and displacing gensets, like even in Rockwell, right heart of Makati, where I am, I see sometimes if there's a big party, big tent going on, they bring these humongous gensets. I mean, that could be just a battery sitting on a tricycle, because 10 kilowatt hour, 20 kilowatt hour is plenty of electricity, right?
Yeah, and the power network in Pakistan has historically been a bit unstable. So as you say, it's sad to see all of those diesel gensets, not just here in the Philippines and such, but there's a lot of them in Pakistan because of the instability of the grid at times. And as you know, those diesel gensets are about as inefficient as you can get. So the more that we can replace them with sort of battery alternatives, much better. That on the power grid, that does raise one issue that we've come across, and it's a problem we're facing right now, I would say, in our project in Bishkek in Kyrgyz, but it's also come up even in our plug-in electric in Peshawar, is that many times the power grid is not set up for the big energy demands that we have with not just our fast charging, but our overnight slow charging, the transformers, the size of the system was quite actually problematic. And we're having, just to give you an example, currently in our project in Bishkek, we're having to distribute our buses, our electric buses that we're doing, not where they're most efficient for the network, but where the power grid can, absorb the demand. So it's not my area especially, it's more on your side, Sahel, but I think that's also an issue going forward with the electrification of the mobility sector, is that a big question is the power grid ready for it?
Yeah, I'm actually intrigued about Bishkek, because Bishkek has trolley buses like we have trams in Melbourne, which is a moving multi-megawatt load when you took at all the trams and others. So if Bishkek was used to taking the trolley loads, Of course, the system capacity is there for that extra substation, and few electric buses is not a huge amount, especially for trickle charge. So yeah, I don't know what happened, whether.
Well, I have brought up that very point, that the energy draw of the trolley is much greater than our, slow charge stationary source. But the difference is that, and again, I'm not a power person, so you have to correct me anything I say wrong, but the city is developed into sort of power cells. And what happens is with the trolley is its own distributed network. So if one cell goes out in the city, the trolley still works because it has redundancies, if you will, because of the way it's connected together. Our problem with our battery electric bus, where our depot is located in just one power cell, if we lose that, we don't have that same redundancy. So you're absolutely right. The power draw on a trolley or whatever is much greater than the battery electric buses, which I think is the direction we're going in general, I should say. Maybe the limitations of where a trolley can operate, and then the whole cantonary costs everything. And as you were saying earlier, the drop in battery costs already makes battery electric buses the winner there. I mean, that's definitely where the market is going. And I like it as a transport planner. Battery electric gives me so much more flexibility in operation than, going with a trolley system. But yeah, that's one issue. The power grid issue is something we need to address. But, I guess my reaction is maybe these power issues need to be addressed anyway. I mean, we're seeing in a lot of our countries, we are seeing power outages on a regular basis. So getting more reliability in the grid, I think, is something we should be doing anyway. And maybe, as we are trying to introduce sort of our solar panel systems and our distributed networks with our batteries and a variety of different vehicles, maybe we're also helping the grid in that way. So I do think, the reliability of the grid is one Achilles heel of electric vehicles in our countries right now. But I also think maybe we're part of that solution when we come in with projects.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you have large batteries embedded in the distribution system, that provides a lot of redundancies. Look what's happening across the board in Australia and other places. So yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit more comprehensive. In the case for Bishkek, because they use electric heating and others, I'm quite surprised that the domestic grid was not sufficient. Maybe national power holding needed to get a little bit more involved, because few electric buses, the extra loading is very little. Anyway, let's not get too specific on this.
Yeah. Although it is a big issue, and we are working with the electricity suppliers there, and we're only talking 120 buses, and yet it's a serious problem. So we are adjusting, which is something I will say I never like to do, because my philosophy is we design our public transport systems around the customer. And right now, unfortunately, what I'm having to do is design around the technology. I'm having to move buses to different depots because of that. And that's fine. I think we'll make it work. But yeah, that is a concern. As I say, I always want to, I want convenience to the customer. I want to reduce dead kilometers. So where we operate a bus from a particular depot, we want it as close to our route network as possible. And that makes us more responsive to the customer. So yeah, I think for electric vehicles to be competitive and to be sort of added value to the customer, we need to find ways that they can just slip in to the system seamlessly.
Yeah. I mean, when I started the idea with that project with the a government official, the approach was coming from the electric So it would have been anyway. But yeah, those challenges are everywhere. Just another idea. I mean, I wanted to do that in the Philippine e-trike project many years ago. Maybe you can do it in Pakistan. The idea was to do um, like a PMT contour map. So just the pollution index. So if you put a little gizmo, I mean, IoT devices are everywhere on each of your tricycles, and they continuously send two pieces of data, the GPS location and PMT CO2. And then on a real life situation, you should be able to do the pollution forecast. And just imagine the impact that will have in the Philippines if you could show, or those 10 houses on Dasma on the EDSA site have, I don't know, very high PMT or this, that will have an impact on properties as well. And people will be aware of it. So, because one single tower somewhere sitting and giving a Manila forecast or any city doesn't help. When you have a really detailed, granular level data, I mean, that can create revolution, because my plan was to put on all e-trikes. Technology was very cheap. But again, that project, I moved on, but I'm sure that will be an opportunity.
I like it. No, as you were speaking, I was writing that idea down. I'm going to steal it because actually one thing our three-wheelers have is in the customer area, we have an LCD screen, and it, it's for infotainment, maybe a little income from advertising as well. But I could take your idea and, as the trip proceeds, we could at times flash up sort of the energy and pollution savings that is occurring. That's a great reinforcement message to our customers. Also, I noticed in Brisbane, for instance, in that bus rapid transit system, at a few places they're using at stations, they're covering in solar power. I noticed that there's sort of LCD screens at the stations, or even showing to the roadway, telling people what's being sort of saved. So I think air pollution data too often it's being held somewhere or just being fed to a few scientists, a few places who worry about these things. But it did strike me in the Brisbane example that making it very public is a positive reinforcement to the system. And I don't know, maybe in our system in Xiaocot, we could have a screen at the for instance at the staging battery bank, which is sort of in the heart of the city. We, in addition to maybe some advertising, but also have that sort of air pollution reduction information, could be a really positive reinforcement.
Yeah. I mean, also you can steal another idea from Waze. I mean, as people check into your tricycle and do the kilometer, you can just say you are category this because you have done so many thousands of kilometers on our electric buses, and annually you can pick up the top 5. I mean, you know what Waze does, right? Gives you
no, absolutely. That's a good idea. And I also should say, you reminded me with our electric three-wheeler project, we are linking up to have an app, sort of an Uber, or in Pakistan, there's a company called Careem. And basically, we are going to have sort of a app-based sort of system. That is another innovation that we really want to modernize the rickshaw industry. Currently, the way it works in most of Pakistan is, you're just sort of, the driver's sort of just, circling, wasting energy, scouting for customers, and the customers likewise are sort of stressed out trying to wave from the roadside. Again, putting an app-based modern system, hopefully we can really be part of lead a transformation on how rickshaws are used and viewed in Pakistan.
Excellent. And then all these customers that will use the vehicle, they have their own data, or they will use the data from the car?
In what sense?
In mobile data, I'm saying, it's common that everyone has their own data plan, or otherwise you can sell data also, right? You can have a subscription.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's also been discussed as a business opportunity for, the more sort of small business opportunities we can put into the income for the system, the better. Yeah, I definitely think as part of, we're talking to one app company right now, and we are looking at electronic payment. There's also the issue, particularly in Karachi, where we're implementing another bus rapid transit system. Can we also link it with the smart card that we're using? So a customer on the BRT system could, in a seamless way, use the same card if they wanted to pay that way with our electric three-wheeler that is going to be linked to our stations. So this is also, I suppose, even like the battery industry, which is, as you know, changing as we very speak, and pricing is changing. Likewise, on the ITS side, that on both sort of smart cards, mobile technology, electronic payment systems, that's also, maybe 2 years ago when we began discussions, maybe we went to Google, and a lot of these sort of apps were beyond what our countries could afford. It's interesting, and that's become an area for entrepreneurs, small business opportunities, which I think is perfect here in Asia, where small businesses form. When we talk EVs, we're only focused maybe on the battery or the vehicle, which I think is very limited in a way of viewing the industry. And particularly there tends to only be there's only a few Teslas out there and BYDs and so forth, but around sort of the payment side, the ITS side, the customer service side, it's just interesting how much other entrepreneurship and how much other employment, if we really think about this in the full chain that's needed for the service.
Yeah, I mean, there's tremendous opportunities because, again, coming back to our project many years ago, the Globe and Smart were very interested to provide internet service through these tricycles at that time. Of course, we didn't have 5G. Now, possibilities are enormous. There are ad companies who wanted to put LCD television outside and sell those space because it will be quite secure. The sort of LCDs you see sometimes in the back of a taxi, but this would be an uniform embedded design. So there are tons and tons of things. Even somebody wanted to run a dedicated TV channel on the tricycle. So
no, that's another idea I'm going to jot down. Actually, you've just reminded me, just the other day, because in Karachi, we're putting in all these high efficiency LED street lighting, right? Mm-hmm. It's part of it. And we're also doing a fiber network along the corridor. But it was pointed out the other day that we should be thinking about, with our new LED street lighting, that the mobile companies and the broadband companies actually may want to use them for their antennae, for their own services. So I never thought about the three-wheelers actually maybe serving a similar purpose, but I'm going to ask. So thank you for bringing that up. Until a few days ago, I didn't even realize that streetlights had value, and that we could actually make money. And now, based on this interaction we've had with one of our consultants, we are actually seriously thinking about doing a PPP, for our fiber network and for our streetlights that may all of a sudden have a value that we never knew existed. And I think that's because, we're all sort of urban transport planners. And we probably need to do more of a 180B approach in this sense, that maybe there are opportunities that we have, we're not focused on because we're we're only looking at the bus or, you know, of one particular area, but yeah, it's an interesting potential revenue source.
Yeah, I mean, I was in University of Charlotte last month, and one of the project that were showing me they're piloting for the city is how to convert every public lighting pole into an electric vehicle charger. Just you attach a gizmo. So that is also there. I mean, for the three-wheelers, this would be a perfect solution. But anyway, we can talk on and on. You and I both like this subject. This can go forever. I'm just thinking, what do you tell wannabe entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs who wants to get into this space? What's your message for him or her?
Well, look, I think there is a lot of room here on so many different areas, and I think to look creatively at the value chain. I have actually done some seminars with young entrepreneurs, and my advice, which I have to admit I stole from another source, but the best way to come up with a business opportunity is to get out there, experience the city, and from your own personal experience, what are the problems? What do you see as being a failing right now? Because a problem is money. And if you can solve that problem, you know, whether it's with an app or with a physical product or simply a different way of producing something, there are different ways people are in the new economy making opportunities. But I think it starts from not sitting there and thinking, I want to make a lot of money. Yes, we all want that, but thinking about what problems do you face in, you know, your experience, and start thinking about based on, you know, what would make it more comfortable, what would make it convenient for you, and that would be the basis of opportunities. You know, earlier I said that it'd probably be difficult to start your own Tesla or, you know, company, but I will note, and maybe part of thanks to something you started here, I've noticed there's some small entrepreneurs now in the Philippines working on electric three-wheelers. And I think maybe at the smaller end of the market where the big players aren't looking, I do think there's room for not just three-wheelers, but anything on micro mobility. I think there's opportunities. I think there's opportunities on the app side that people can come in. So look at the whole value chain would be another area of advice. But yeah, my overall message is get out into the city, experience it, and where you see problems, that there's actually probably a solution that is a business.
Absolutely, because could not agree more. When we first took electric vehicle or electric tricycle idea to Boracay, I think Mayor was saying, sir, this is a developed country, it's not for us. And today I went in Boracay in January, and you must have been in recently, all tricycles are electric, all. Wow. And you measure the distance. This is the power of ADB, whether we fail in a project or not, all have the same dimension that we put out in the public domain, the same specification. It made me feel so good.
You should. You planted, Sahil, you planted a seed, and yeah, that seed probably has taken hold. I know they're working. Well, some of the provinces near to Manila as well, I see there's some penetration. And I think all of this has happened, you know, spontaneously, which, you know, ultimately that's what we can only hope for with our investments. Us alone with ADB, you know, financing, we're just a very small part of the bigger need. But if we can plant a seed, then the market hopefully will then pick it up and carry it forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else that we did not discuss you want to highlight or?
Well, as you say, I know we can go on forever on these topics, but thank you for hosting this podcast. I think we should do more of these. These are fast-moving times in terms of technology. These are fast-moving times across the board, and because of our lockdowns and everything, maybe we don't have as many personal interactions in all of our daily lives, but we need to think about more conversations like this to keep exchanging ideas. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely to have you. I'm sure some of my listeners can come back and will learn a little bit more about the project. Of course, they can Google and find you quite easily, right?
And I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.